Hello, this is another video on the subject of Looper VST plugins and specifically the Melda Productions M Super Looper, which I got hold of recently. This is kind of a follow-up to my previous video in which I was demonstrating how to use the multiple outputs function. I talked a bit about how to set that up in a sequencer from scratch and also spent some time talking through some of the basic features of M Super Looper, some of the functions. I thought I'd do a quick follow-up just because in that video I didn't really demonstrate all the advantages of that approach and why it's such a good idea to use the multiple outputs. So I thought I'd run through sort of 3 examples very quickly of just how you might set up a looper in terms of the inputs and the outputs that you have and the sort of advantages and disadvantages of each approach. So without further ado, this is example number 1. So here in project 1, what I have is just a very simple setup. So I've just got a few drum tracks at the top. I've got an instance of M Super Looper set up on this purple track at the bottom, and there's literally just 2 tracks feeding into it. So I've got my MIDI pedal feeding in here from track 4, and I've got a guitar signal coming in from track 5. So these both feed straight into M Super Looper. The guitar channel here has a instance of Guitar Rig loaded, and it's just got a sort of a jazzy, clean chorus sound set up. Just a preset that comes with Guitar Rig 5. In terms of the way I'm recording, it's the same as in my previous video. I'm using sync and I'm set to 4 bars. I haven't changed any of the other defaults on here, so the overdub settings are still on, and I've just got 1 track of guitar. So this is the simplest way you can use a looper, and it's probably how you would, when you first start playing around with this kind of software, is what you would do. Just send a couple of tracks into it and then start recording. So I'm just going to do that with a quick little 4-chord thing that I've been messing about with. And yeah, we'll record that and then I'll just talk through what's happening. So we've got 1 track there going. It's auto overdubbing, so I don't need to do anything else. I can just keep playing over. Still looping, just layering up. Let's do some chords. I think that's enough. The more you add, the more obviously it's going to get sort of harder to distinguish all the parts that you're recording. So I'll just stop that now. Start recording. And stop the sequencer. So what you've got there is just like a very simple stereo signal going in, recording, looping over automatically. It's a really nice way of just layering up a simple idea. But the only sort of disadvantage with this is that you've only got one set of outputs and you're only recording into this one little loop here on 1 track. So I'd say it's a nice way of sort of building up just a scratch pad of ideas, because you've only have to hit the pedal once to record and then you can just keep recording things in. As soon as you get past sort of 4 or 5 parts, they all just sort of start meshing in. So I wouldn't necessarily record a song in this way or even perform in this way, unless I was, for example, creating maybe, say, like a nice sort of evolving ambient guitar piece or something like that. So you could put some nice delay and effects on it, just keep recording parts in. I've not actually investigated this in Melda yet, but there should be an option where you can have like a feedback setting so that the early loops start disappearing as the new ones come in, so you create a constantly evolving piece. So that's one thing you can do with this. But if you're doing, like I say, if you were doing songs, you wouldn't have many options if you were trying to complete a whole track with what you could do with what you've recorded there. Because if I hit play, it sounds quite nice, but if you exported that onto a track in your sequencer, you've just got those guitars all sort of printed on top of each other. So you wouldn't be able to do any mixing with it. You'd be stuck with that sound, essentially. So yeah, that's option number 1. And let's move on to number 2. So this is my second project, and in this project, that routing is set up exactly the same. The only difference being that I've now got 3 tracks here in M Super Looper, and what I'm going to do, I've turned off the overdub settings, and instead I'm going to use my pedal to switch between the tracks as I record. So I'll record the 4 bars, switch to the next one, switch to the next one. What this does, what you'll be able to see, is it just gives you that little bit more separation on the guitars that I'm recording. You can see on track 2 here, I've actually panned that one with the looper 74% left. Track 3 is going 73% right. So when I do those little melodies and chords and other parts, they'll be panned. So you just get a bit of stereo separation. And within Melda as well, they are very generous with their free effects. So in each of these tracks, you've also got an FX and settings panel here. And you can load up, you've got a full modular environment, which includes all of Melda's free effects. So, you can start loading up effects and doing different things. And then that way actually sort of creating more of a mix, creating a bit of separation on the parts. So I'm just going to record that quickly so you can hear what that sounds like. Switch track. So now I've got 3 tracks running, as you can see. There's a little bit more stereo separation. If you're listening to this with headphones, you'll be able to hear the melody on the left, the chords on the right. I'm just going to stop that playing again. So that's just giving you a little bit more flexibility in terms of your mix. So you'd then be able to create a mix from that. You would be limited to using Melda's plugins because you're doing everything from within the interface of M Super Looper, and you might have a lot of their plugins, and like I say, they do offer all the free ones with all those FX and settings, so you can build up EQs and delays and things. I've got a lot of them. Obviously, they're a kind of, I think you can use the white ones, and then the red ones are all the ones that I haven't got. So if you bought those plugins, then they would appear within here. Is the way I understand it. But then if you're not invested in Melda and their plugins already, then you're just that little bit limited still. So you can separate things out, you can mix things, you can mix within the environment of their plugins. But I would imagine a lot of people like myself who've bought this plugin, you might have a lot of your own plugins and want to be using those to sort of do your mixes and that kind of thing. So you could use the export function and export all these to tracks in your sequencer, and then use your own plugins to mix from there. But you wouldn't really be able to use this perhaps in a live scenario, because again, it's just coming out on the two sort of the stereo left and right output of that looper track. So if you were to send that to from an output on your sound card to a sound desk at a gig, you'd still be just mixing all the guitars together. Which could work, but obviously you might want more options. And if you want more options, that is where we come on to example number 3. So here's project 3. I've got the Melda set up almost exactly the same as again. So we've got 3 tracks, but in Reaper, we've now got 3 tracks which correspond to the 3 tracks in here. And I'll just bring up the looping on the looper track here, and it will be exactly the same as I described in that tutorial that I did last time, so I won't talk through it too much. But if you bring that up, you can see, so that track is receiving from the pedal track and from the guitar track, and it's outputting to 3 tracks on here: riff, lead, and chords. And obviously the riff comes from audio 1-2 on the Melda track, which corresponds to track 1 in the looper. Lead comes from 3-4, so 3-4 is the stereo pair here, going to this lead track here, and then 5/6 is the chords. So the third looper track routing to chords in Reaper. So that means I've now got 3 tracks going out all separately. And what I can do with that, so rather than having that jazzy chorus guitar sound going into Melda, into the looper, I've got just the guitar source here has nothing on it. So it's just a completely dry sound going in. And that means when you get to the outputs, so these tracks here corresponding to these here, you can now use different instances of all your effects. And so I've got just 3 instances of Guitar Rig loaded up. So I'll just run through those quickly. So the riff, again, that is the exact same one that I was using in those first 2 examples. So on this track, you'll hear that sort of chorusy, sort of clean, jazzy amp sound. And then for the melody this time, you go to the lead track, just sort of a more of a subtle bit of delay, a little bit of ambience on it for the sort of lead melodic sound. And then on the chords, if I play those chords, just a much warmer sort of sound with a little bit of a swell on that. And actually I might just take that off, because that I'm going to save for the example at the end. So I'm just going to bypass a few effects, because I'm going to use those at the end when we play these all back to back. So that's the swells I've got on Guitar Rig. So I'm just going to turn those off quickly, to make it more interesting when I play all these back to back. So yeah, this is example number 3, and I'll just do a quick recording of that. And as I switch tracks, I'm actually going to go to the bridge pickup for even a more different sound. So now you've just got, I wouldn't necessarily say this sounds better than the first example, but you've got more separation, you've got more difference in what's going on. I'm going to stop it again because I don't want to talk over it. So yeah, you've got a nice sort of lead sound with a bit of delay on it. You've got like a warmer sound on those chords, and you can just do a lot more to create a nice sort of good mix. And, that's the way that I like to work with loopers. I do like to build up sort of whole tracks, have drums going underneath, do live vocals over the top of it sometimes. So yeah, that's where multiple outputs are a really cool feature and give you a lot of different flexibility in what you can do. I'm just going to edit in a quick video at the end of this to show each of those examples back to back, so you can hear the differences. And again, like I say, it's not necessarily better because I've just put this together really quickly, but it does give you those options, and it does give you a lot more sort of wiggle room and flexibility in terms of making a full track and separating out your elements to create something that potentially sounds really cool. Okay, here's the video.